I more and more think this team looks better under Tuchel so far without a natural forward, without a Olivier Giroud or Tammy Abraham.
Wait, you don't want Haaland? Is that what you're saying?
Standards Claxon, standards Claxon. I don't know. From what I've seen so far, I think we play much better when there isn't an obvious focal point in this system. I think it lends itself to a false nine. It lends itself to a fluid front three. I look at the games that have impressed me so far have been Tottenham away, when Callum Hudson-Odoi, Timo Werner and Mason Mount played in that front three. And, no one was really the focal point. You could argue Mason was the other night. I still feel that's where we've looked most fluid. I don't know why that is. I think in the Olivier Giroud scores the overhead kick, right, and it's an incredible moment. But his all-round play for me, when I've watched him play so far, I don't think has been amazing. I don't think it.
No, agreed.
We're maybe the exception of the Newcastle game where he scored himself and Chelsea were a lot more on the front foot. But I don't, and maybe that's a case of Newcastle sitting so deep. But you've got to have a system that can maybe alter and bend and flex to a variety of opposition while still also keeping consistency. I mean, you don't want to be shifting that front three and that midfield week in, week out. I still think Tuchel himself would like to have some sort of consistency despite his sort of ability to change things up. I don't know. What do you think? Because that's another area, right?
It.
It's
I like
because
it.
Chelsea lack a goal scorer at the moment. We lack a consistent goal scorer.
Yeah, it's a tough one, isn't it? Because you think about all the attackers we have, and then who do you pick to be the consistent guys there? That is so hard because if you're not going to play Mason midfield, like, he has to be on the pitch. He just has to be on the pitch. So then you're left with two players because Mace is better than Kai Havertz this season, and people are going to be up in arms about that, but it's fact. So then do you play Kai as a false nine? Do you play Timo through the middle? Do you play Hudson-Odoi? What do you do with Pulisic? Is Ziyech going to go? It's a tough one for Tuchel to work out and to balance. So, it'd be interesting. But yeah, I like it. And I think people don't expect teams, except for Pep Guardiola teams, to perhaps operate without a traditional focal point. And that can maybe throw people off because when you're so fluid and you're able to interchange your positions along the front line, it's quite hard for defenders to work out where you're going to be because you're consistently providing them with different problems.
Because I do want to ask this. This is a great transfer related one and a great what if.
I think I've seen this. Seen this. Yeah, go on.
This is from Tom, who asks, which are you picking? Number one, Chelsea sign Rice but have to use Alvaro Morata up front instead of signing Erling Haaland. And number two is Chelsea signed Haaland but have to use Timothy Bakayoko in CDM instead of signing Declan Rice.
Is it? I think I'm going to have to say this really, really quietly. But I quite like Bakayoko, I think he's actually...
I want a redemption. We've got one redemption arc in Christensen. We need another one in
The thing is, though, Bakayoko has been brilliant everywhere except for at Chelsea. And even then, I wasn't sure, I thought he was excellent against, Atleti in the Champions League for us. It just wasn't working straight away.
FA Cup final against Man United, and against Liverpool at the back end under Conte, he came back into it. And I felt so sorry for him, man, being booed away to Watford. I mean, it was the worst half an hour of football I've seen from any Chelsea player, but still. And there are a lot of problems that season, right? And I think a lot of people pinned, I think context is everything, right? And I think Bakayoko, a bit like a few Chelsea players down the years, Morata as well, started really well at Chelsea. And both of them, it just seemed to collapse post-Christmas. And
now they're both doing well now. They're both doing, Morata's having a really, genuinely very good season. And Bakayoko's, since he's been in Italy, he's been brilliant. He's actually been really, really good. And there's obviously good players in there. And I think that, Dan and I are both massive on Declan Rice, but Haaland is a talent level above. Even though we've spoken about the fluidity of the front three, I like Bakayoko enough to accept him in that position to maybe give Haaland a go. Do you know what I mean?
If Haaland doesn't work, what then? I think we should just rip it up and start all over again. Because if Haaland comes in and fails, I
honestly don't think he's going to come in. I've said this so many times. I genuinely can't see it. I think.
Okay, then who? Because apparently Chelsea we know Chelsea are going to be making some signings in the summer, and based off the evidence of last season, it doesn't really matter where. It sounds a little bit childish to say it doesn't really matter what Tuchel says, but there are club targets and there are coach targets, and it seems that club targets do win more often than not. If we're not signing Haaland, who's the striker, right? Because despite my belief that a fluid front three works, this team needs a 20-goal season striker. Unless Tuchel can conjure up something with this current crop of attackers to turn us into a Liverpool-type front three in a short space of time. I mean, there's a couple of things this team needs if it wants to win a Premier League title. It needs a DM. It needs a goal-scoring midfielder. It probably needs another centre-back. I'd say Lukaku, but we have, Oh, how about a really radical idea? We stick with Tammy Abraham, who's been Chelsea's top goal scorer this season and was Chelsea's top goal scorer last season.
I watch every Inter Milan game. Right, I really, really like Inter Milan. I do not want Lukaku leaving Inter Milan because there's something about players that just suit a club and are really, really enjoying it. Like, why on earth would he leave? They're top of Serie A by 6 points. They're going to win the league. They're the best team in it by an absolute mile. And he's the best player there. And I think he's the most underrated player in Europe in the sense that he is actually this season arguably a top 10 player in the world. Yeah, like fully. He is unbelievable. I promise I watch him every single week. His technique, his ability, it's off the charts. It's so good, and I don't think he would want to return to Chelsea. He said previously that he loves the club and he's grateful for what's happened there, but to get Lukaku out is expensive,
especially from Conte, who wanted Lukaku when he was here. So
literally,
I'm just going with because Chelsea aren't going to go and sign someone that we don't know. You've got to think Chelsea are going to sign someone that's quite obvious because we make obvious signings.
But I said this. Look, Kai, Timo, Callum Hudson-Odoi, Mason Mount, Ziyech, Pulisic, Tammy. That's 7 players. How on earth? Like, there has to be a way that these guys start contributing. I mean, literally. I firmly believe that. As he gets older and older, Mount's just going to add more goals. I don't think that's his primary purpose, but I think it just will happen naturally. Timo, he's so active. I can't shake the fact that I think he's going to develop into a very, very devastating player. Kai Havertz, I have always had reservations about, and that was an unpopular one at the time when we signed him, and I spoke about those then. Hudson-Odoi, I think he'll add goals. Tammy is hugely underrated by certain sections of the fan base. I think he's an excellent player as well. I definitely think he's a Champions League level striker, if not, a top 6 striker for sure. There's so many goals in that team, potential goals, that if they, I see it almost like Man City. I know Aguero scores all the time, or did, but there are players in that Chelsea attack that. There's 5 players there that could easily put over 10 goals and arguably 10 assists together if everything went to plan.
And if Pulisic, I know it feels more and more like a real unique purple patch in his career, but I mean, I was of the probably quite silly belief now that I was looking at him and going, I think this guy could be a 20-goal winger if he maintains a level.
I don't think that's silly.
Because I look at his movement, right, and to me, why I think he could work in his front three is he's got anticipation to be in the right place at the right time, to constantly make runs inwards, from the left, a bit like Timo does. And it probably is quite difficult to put both Timo and Pulisic on the pitch. I felt the other night Pulisic is maybe not finding it as easy at the moment because he's having to play on the right most of the time. And I think at Chelsea he's constantly looked more devastating on the left. And that's a challenge, right? We bought Timo Werner, and that's who do you prioritize, right? But in a fluid front three, you think that both of them could start and could interchange positions.
This is what I'm saying. Like it's so tempting to always go and buy the shiny new toy, but we have a lot of talent already, and I think it's pretty unprecedented for a team with such talent like we have for only one of them to be in, Mason Mount, for only one of them to be in form. I think Cho's been great, but he obviously has another level there. Pulisic struggled with injury. He's got levels to go. Werner just needs to finish off his chances, and he'll score bucket loads. Kai Havertz we need to see more of, but he's had a tough time, long COVID and everything. I'm willing to give him, all of that. And Ziyech as well. I've actually not been very critical of Ziyech because I've really liked his movement since he's been on the pitch. He pulls into. You watch him drift from the right into the box, and then he stands maybe 3 yards behind a penalty spot. And 2 games in a row now, he's had shots cleared off the line by defenders. They're fine margins that aren't consistent. That they change. Out of 10 times, those shots are going in. Maybe half the time. And when he starts doing that, there's goals to be shared. And you look at City this season with Aguero not playing. You got Mahrez and De Bruyne and Foden and everyone chipping in. And that unpredictability about who's going to be where and who's doing what, and that means teams don't know what's going to happen. And we have such talent already there that I think they're good enough to warrant perhaps another season of trying and experimenting, especially if the defensive midfield's solid, because that gives you the freedom to do so. If Chelsea, specifically Chelsea fans, that the response I always get is, well, we've got the money. Well, if we've got the money, we'll buy Haaland in 3 years then.